Mm-hmm. Good morning, welcome. Thank you for being here today with us physically, and to those of you who are watching, thank you again for joining us on this session. My name is Angelica Kokinaki, and I'm here today with my colleague.
Hi, my name is Stella Glanthous, or Styliani Glanthous, and we are from the University of Nicosia, representing the European Network of Academic Integrity on this workshop. And we are going to provide some information, some insight, experiences we had at the University of Nicosia regarding technology enhanced learning approaches for creating awareness in academic integrity among our students and also the teachers at the University of Nicosia.
Mm-hmm. So what we are trying to do today is fundamentally to walk you through the progress that we have made in the last few years and discuss how it all started and the motivation that we had to look towards this direction. We will like to touch upon the theoretical background because many people think that it's all about technology when in effect it is all about learning, and talk to you about the learning methodology that we have used and the development process that we have followed so that we are now in a position to have developed courses related to academic integrity and the way we evaluate them. And then we are going to conclude with a demonstration. So initially, we identified in the literature that academic integrity is something that affects us all. All of us, no matter where we are located, no matter if we're located in an institution, a university, a technical university, we have to face and somehow protect ourselves with regards to promoting good practices in academic integrity. It is not only a moral issue. I would like to emphasize that this is not only the ethical thing to do. It also has impact in terms of acceptance of our universities and in terms of strengthening the position of our universities international, and in doing so also strengthening the service that we are in, namely the educational sector of each country. So although it is an international phenomenon and we have surveys that show how intense it is at international levels, we would have to rely on this data and see and examine how things are progressing in each of one's educational institution, in each one country. So what we have initially stated is a number of different studies and surveys by the Center of Academic Integrity that found that almost 80% of students have admitted to cheating at least once. A survey by Psychological Record showing that 36% of undergraduate students have admitted that they have plagiarized. A poll by US News and World Reports that shows that 90% of students believe that even if they do something, they will get away with whatever they do. An investigation by Times newspaper that about 50,000 students were caught cheating in colleges in the last 3 years, and differentiations among different variations of what we consider academic misconduct and how these are detected or not detected, and what consequences they may have or may not have. So having this as a starting point, we have to put that into perspective and come and see who are the involved stakeholders when we talk about academic misconduct. And as we have seen before, there is a lot of attention, and rightly so, when it comes to students. But I would like also to emphasize that it doesn't concern students only, okay? It is difficult for me, being a member of academic community, to point fingers, but we have a problem when it comes to research, to competitive funding. We have problems of colleagues publishing plagiarized papers. Okay, so it concerns the lecturers as well, and it also concerns the institution in terms of policy, but also university managers, because high-rank academics, they want to have results, they want to see that the university is progressing, is attracting more students, or it's a higher rank in international rankings. And sometimes they turn a blind eye when it comes to breaches of academic integrity. And my position is very clear. I don't come from a background where these deviations are considered to be the initiation of a punitive approach, but I would rather safeguard my institution, my educational community from any possible attacks in the future, because I do consider that doing the right way pays off dividends at the end. So let me talk a bit about plagiarism in Cyprus and how it all started. Some 10 years ago, we have identified at a personal level breaches of academic integrity, and I was personally appalled by the fact that A, not too many people actually expressed a clear position on the matter, and B, there was no clear indication on what to do when it comes to prevent and confine these approaches. And at the beginning, I thought that, well, it has to do with the particular university that I'm in, but looking around, I realized that that was a greater problem. And at the same time, we have started writing a proposal, an Erasmus proposal at that time, that was successful. And the aim of this proposal was to understand the driving forces of plagiarism and see how we could prevent it. And I have to admit that our understanding at the beginning, it was very, I would say now limited. I would admit that it was limited because we were concentrated on plagiarism, where plagiarism is just one part of the big spectrum of academic misconduct, and we were focusing primarily to students, be that undergraduate or graduate students, and we didn't consider that in fact the involved stakeholders are far more. But nonetheless, we do understand now where we were some time ago and where we have to go further. And if I can share with you some of the results that we had from a national survey that occurred in Cyprus. When it comes to students, for example, the majority of them say that they learn how they should do proper academic references during their undergraduate studies. Some of them, they say that they did it before they started their undergraduate studies or during the undergraduate studies, but there is also some considerable percentages that they do it farther down their educational path, and notable, about 14% that they are not sure when they learn it, when they were exposed to this. So nonetheless, we have also identified that the confusion of students also relates to the fact that the services are provided through many different channels. Most of them, they receive it during the class. But we have also advice from tutors and lecturers on an individual basis. There are some organized attempts from an academic support unit or the library and some other channels as well. So in effect, this tells us that there is a lack of clear understanding where students learn about plagiarism and how they are taught good practices to avoid it, and we should put more attention towards prevention, education, implementing in a consistent manner and through a very diverse yet easily accessible approaches, ways to enhance the understanding of faculty, of students, and I would add higher rank academics about plagiarism and academic misconduct in general. So the first step that we did, and it was interesting when I heard the colleague mentioning that earlier today, was to hope that by embracing technology, most of our problems would be solved, sort of automatically. In fact, part of that project that we ran had a provision, very luckily for us, to go for a plagiarism detection software. That was intentionally stated here, yes, as plagiarism detection, because at that time, the market leader software was self-promoting itself as exactly that, plagiarism detection. Now they have understood that this marketing a powerful message was in fact a misrepresentation of what they did, and I will be sharing some examples with that later on. So what we are going to discuss mostly today with you is how we educate students, of course, consistently and utilizing technology to the extent that we can. Okay, so I believe most of you are familiar with what Turnitin provides, but just to bring everybody on the same page, this is a typical example of the result that we get when we run a text through Turnitin. Namely, we get parts of the text being highlighted in different colors. Yes?
Sorry for the interruption.
Yes, please.
Do you use the studio version, the new version?
Right now, I present what we were using at that time. Okay? Yes, and now we use the studio version. And we were getting highlights, and we were referring to what sources they were used and what part of the text was exactly copied with or without references. And I have to admit this is a very powerful tool, but I have to say that it's only a tool in the hands of the educator. It is not a silver bullet, and one has to develop a very good understanding of its strengths and its weaknesses. Like, for example, here, somebody may assume that having 100% similarity without giving attributions or quotations or whatever, this is a clear sign of committing plagiarism. But it is not always the case, okay? Because if the student had run if the university allows the students to submit a previous version of their work before their final submission to the course, and the student has submitted before to check where they stand in a way to self-correct themselves, then the second time it runs through, if the Turnitin program is not particularly well fine-tuned, then it may result to having 100% similarity. Yeah? So it might be the case, or it may not be the case. And the instructor needs to be aware of that, otherwise he or she may come to conclusions that are unjustified. And what we also have to be very clear is to get away from this tyranny of numbers, okay? 51 similarity. Oh, it's over 50%. It is plagiarism. Yes. Numbers are just indicators. As an example here, I have the master thesis work of a person who was commenting a protocol, a technical protocol. And they were referring to the protocol in exactly the same way as it was written, and then they would have to comment where this spectrum rights protocol was particularly suitable or not with regards to the policy of a certain entity. So you see here that it is overwhelmingly 51%, but in fact this number doesn't mean anything. If we have to accuse the student of something, is possibly of poor academic writing. Yes, because the essence of the work was not what she copied out of the protocol, but the loopholes they have identified, the weaknesses that they have identified that are not working in this particular case. So early on, we realized the limitations of just relying on a tool, whatever this tool might be, and we identified the need to have an organized, well-structured way to educate all stakeholders with regards to the concepts related to academic integrity. That includes plagiarism and other things beyond that. Initially, we were advised that we are going to have 19 participants. Obviously, we have less than that. And we would like to have some discussions with, within teams. But yes, due to
low participation.
Well, to the fact that we cannot form the workshop as we had in mind,
no. So
we have to proceed. But before that, I would like to take this opportunity and ask if there are questions or comments from the participants, and especially with regards to expectations of what a technology-enhanced environment could bring to the academic community with regards to avoidance of incidents of misconduct. Yeah?
Okay.
Okay. Right. Okay. So what is the next stage would be, we have identified the need. We have to have a systematic educational approach. How do we do it? And what we don't show are earlier attempts of putting together lectures and having a plan for a
systematic way of educating stakeholders.
What we cannot actually show is the fact that at the beginning we thought that putting an e-learning course together, because this is what we were heading, having an e-learning course that will be readily available. It will be an open educational resource. Everybody at our university and beyond could have it. Well, it is as if I take all my experience that I have in class with my physical students, and then I automatically transfer that onto an environment, a platform, a Moodle account or a Canvas or whatever, yes? And it doesn't exactly work that way. So we figure it out early on, and then we went towards the direction of looking deeper into e-learning from an educational perspective, and then we have identified quite a lot of work in relation to instructional design, and we followed one of the most popular models for the development of these educational resources, namely the Addie Model. And it is an acronym. It takes the name after the major phases: analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation that we go through before we are able to develop the course. And what we have here are the three first phases: analysis, design, development, with all the different activities that are interleaved underneath. Then we have the actual implementation, and here we have the final phase, the evaluation. And for each one of them, as we are going to see in each of the next slides, we have to go through a structured, systematic approach to be able to come to the desired outcome.
I think what is important to see here is that before we actually implement this kind of e-learning courses, there is a lot more preparation in order to be able to achieve the desired goals. So most of the work that we need to do is actually before implementing it. Mm-hmm. So we spend a lot of time to analyze and to try to see what we want to achieve with this course, and how do we want the students and also the lecturers to perceive the concepts that we wanted to share with them before we actually implement and evaluate. So yeah, do you want to continue, or should I?
Whatever.
Okay.
We can interleave.
Yeah. First of all, we needed to, since this was going to be an e-learning module, and we were supposed to have students taking this module openly and self-direct their learning, we wanted to base the approach in some theoretical work. So we followed the constructivist approach, where the learners are constructing their knowledge based on previous experiences, and also the self-directed approach, where we needed to provide enough material for the learner to be able to move into a structured methodology and to follow the activities, to be able to understand the concepts that are in the theory, and so on. So after all, it was an online learning module with an open learning management system. So this was a very important aspect for us to look into. And then it was the implementation. In the implementation, we needed to decide on the platform, basically. So what was going to be this e-learning module based on in terms of technology, and also what were the activities and the material that we're going to include in this module. The learning module that we decided to acquire was Moodle for several reasons. First of all, the University of Nicosia at that time was based on Moodle. I mean, all the e-learning material, the open resources we had was based on Moodle, so it was easier for us to have access to this technology and also support from the university. Since we wanted to keep this going, it was not just one-off. The second one was that Moodle is by default easily adjustable, configurable, and we had this flexibility ourselves to work on it since we have a computer science background. But it was also easier for people, technology people at the university to provide help if other lecturers wanted to do that and they didn't have the background themselves. So in terms of experience, we can say that if you don't have a platform at the university that you are working on and you want to adopt something, Moodle can be one of the easiest to configure and to get help online or on site if you need to.
And less expensive.
And less expensive, of course. The financial aspect is always an issue when we're talking about technology. So what we have in Moodle and what we wanted to utilize, basically, because Moodle has a huge repository of resources that you can use, I mean, tools. We wanted to have discussion forums, first of all, so we wanted to give the student the chance to ask questions, discuss with the lecturer, discuss with fellow students, and so on. Quizzes. The quizzes were focused on the self-evaluation, so the student had the chance to evaluate his or her knowledge in aspects of academic integrity. Lessons, so we have actually lessons, so resources that will allow the student to enhance the knowledge that already possesses, and links to external resources. For example, now that we have NIE developed resources, we can provide links to those resources that are developed by experts.
And there is one point that I would like to emphasize, and perhaps it has some externalities in Latvian audience as well. Our language of instruction at the University of Nicosia is English officially, but our students to a great extent come from a background that their first language is Greek. So it is very difficult for them to understand what they have to do in English if their experiences were limited, even in their Greek educational background. So we have developed material, content that was in Greek in order for them to facilitate them understand in their first language what was the issue at hand and what to do. And then by transportation they would be able to implement it in another language.
Okay, so in order to add a bit of gamification, we also added games, so JavaScript games, very simple, easy to integrate within the platform. And we had the chance to use WebEx, since the University of Nicosia has access to the tool for synchronous communication for sessions that we wanted to facilitate. Just again, part of experience. This is not mandatory, especially for universities that are struggling financially to support these services, since these are quite expensive tools. The most important part, I think, for communication is then discussion forums, and also students feel more comfortable using discussion forums rather than the synchronous communication. And especially if you allow them to participate anonymously, that's even better.
Especially for this subject.
Yeah.
Especially
Yeah.
for this subject.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would like to point out that WebEx is a wonderful tool, a very powerful tool, but it also requires that the student has a mindset open up to the possibility of using this technology and communicate online with their lecturer. And even my MBA students, at the beginning of each of the course, they are sort of reluctant, sort of shy to turn on their microphone and pose questions live. They would rather use the chat box and type in whatever question they may have, unless there are some instructional activities dedicated to the purpose of enable them to use the synchronous communication tool. Now, bring that into perspective that we are talking about sensitive issues, and some people may not feel comfortable raising their hand and expressing a question or describing a situation, and you will understand that, okay, we use it because it was easy for us, but this is not absolutely necessary.
So, yeah. So what we wanted to achieve, we had first cycle students, and as Angelica mentioned before, we are talking about students coming from Greek-speaking schools into an English-speaking university. So you understand that here we have the language barrier, and also what we want to do in the future maybe is to accommodate other languages at the University of Nicosia. Since we are an international university, we have students from Russia, from Ukraine, from Africa, so maybe we could go into that far, but this was for the Greek-speaking students. So we wanted them to feel comfortable, to understand the material, and get the knowledge to apply it into an English essay that they were writing. So yeah, we try to analyze the needs that we had in terms of what do learners need to reach, for example, at the end of this course. So what activities we can use to help them, as we described before. And following this line of thought, we created this environment. It's at the moment the material online is in Greek and some in English as well, because we have developed the resources through NI and we can use them. And then we wanted to see, okay, so will this be used? I mean, what is going to cost in terms of time, in terms of money? Will this be actually affordable for the university? And also the students will spend enough time through this course in order to be able to achieve the overall goals. And this is, I believe, important for universities that do not have the resources, as I said before, to facilitate a very sophisticated tool to take into consideration. So there are tools available. Moodle is free. So there are other channels that you can incorporate in these tools, platforms, that you can actually create an awareness through an open module.
But I would also like to point out that it is also a very expensive process in terms of required person hours. I was about to say man hours, but then I thought, oh no, this is not politically correct. End of parenthesis, person hours. And as you can see, for an hour of learning, the background effort that needs to be invested is horrendous, is truly a lot. So we didn't have the resources, we didn't have a budget to develop a course that at the end of the day would be offered as a service to the students. So what we did is that at different stages of analysis, design and implementation, we gave out as projects to our students, to our graduate students, pieces of the required work that needed to be done. Okay, so they completed, out of this process, we have some students completing their master's thesis project, and then the outcome would be incorporated in the design of the course that we are about to show.
Okay, and then we are moving into the design phase. So at the design phase, we need to again go back and see the objectives we have, what we want to, what our learners need in order to achieve these objectives and so on. And based on this framework, you are designing the environment. So you are designing the interface, first of all, so what the student will see in front, and then what will be included in this interface, the content. And by the content and the design, we mean a structured way. So if you need the learner or the student to go through a number of resources or set of material in such a way that will provide the user with the necessary understanding and development of knowledge, you need to have a structure. So we decided to do this into lessons, into not weeks. We didn't separate in terms of weeks because this was a self-directed course. We separated into modules. So we said module 1 is this subject and will include these resources, and when the student will finish with this, then there is a self-evaluation quiz. And moving into the second module, that was a continuation of the module before, and so on. So we needed to have this structure in order to help the student to actually achieve the desired goals. Okay, this is a schematic approach of what I have just described. And then we needed to see, okay, what will be the reward and what will motivate the students in order to be able to achieve this, to go through this material, complete the self-evaluation quizzes, and achieve the overall desired goals. And this gave us the idea of the gamification of the whole process further. So this is just a description of what we have, a screenshot of what we have developed. So for example, this is a module and these are the resources, and the whole lesson is structured in this way. So you want to?
I just want to point out that gamification is often conceived as a solution to by itself, but we in this context view it mostly as a tool. And gamification was introduced through the proper or the suggested by the literature way in order to actually help our students achieve the educational goals that we had prescribed.
Okay, so yeah, we evaluated the Moodle course that was developed in several ways. So first of all, we provided the students with questionnaires, and whoever, when I'm saying students, I mean whoever actually attended the course, because this could also be faculty. So we provided questionnaires, and we also use rubric lists in order to evaluate. And if anyone is actually interested, our emails will appear at the end of the presentation, and you can send us an email and we can provide more information. So just to give you an idea, does the course teach properly? Is the content concise, updated and suitable? Does it work properly, and so on? So these were the questions behind the development of the questionnaires. And then based on these questions, we developed the evaluation material. So appropriate teaching strategy based on best practices, screen presentation, and how this is perceived by the student, if it's distractive or if it's ambiguous, and so on. comments, the language that is used, if it's easy to understand by the users, and the graphical user interface, whether it supports the process of learning in this context. So yeah, we spend a lot of time. So as Angeliki mentioned before, this is a costly procedure for the developers of the course, because we wanted to see the typos, grammar, the syntax, if it's correct, to validate and update the content continuously. So we are updating this course each semester. The language should be unbiased. So since we have an international audience eventually, and the Cyprus students who are interacting in this international environment, we need to have unbiased knowledge, and also to take consideration of the demographic and the knowledge characteristics of the audience that we are expecting. So yeah, this again, does it work properly, and what we have used in order to be able to evaluate, and then the usability. So we wanted to see ease of use and navigation. Before this workshop, we had a discussion with one of the participants about which tool is more user-friendly than other. So user-friendliness is, of course, one of the criterion that you need to take into consideration. So, as I said before, can we make this experience for this course even more attractive to the student or the user? So we are taking this one step further, and we are trying to see whether we can incorporate into the university a 3D virtual world that will actually provide the user with resources. So still have the structure, still have the possibility to learn the same material, but in a more exciting and a more attractive environment. So yeah, we are talking about Second Life like worlds based on OpenSim in our case. So again, here we are using an open source platform. So it costs nothing for someone to develop such an environment on a university server. The only thing that you will need is actually the technical people at the university to configure and provide you access to install this into the server of the university, a server of the university. And what we can do with 3D virtual worlds, we can have, first of all, a very playful and gamified environment. We have the socialization, we have the communication, we have the students or the faculty being presented there as avatars. So we have a more personal contact among the students. And
if I may add something, I have a son who is about to be 16 years old. And for him, it is far more intuitive to be in an environment like Fortnite. Fortnite is now very popular among youngsters, at least in Cyprus, and collect the information in an interactive, playful way, rather than be directed to read something, or even watch a video. For them might be boring. Yeah. So yeah, we try to bring them in a world that is familiar and pleasing to them, but providing them with the tools to build proper habits when it comes to their academic conducts.
So what we can have in these environments, you can simulate the university campus that you already have. So we have already created an environment that is not the real campus of the University of Nicosia, but is a campus out of a fantasy, okay? So we try to make it attractive, we try to make it exciting for the students, but we have the meeting rooms, okay? So we have meeting points that the students can go in and discuss we can have real-time interaction here, and of course, through the use of the avatar, the user is actually finding it far more interesting, and they can immerse in this environment in order for them to learn without actually subconsciously they are learning through these games. So, okay, for us, what was important was the presence. So we wanted to have the students feel present, feel physically in this environment, and to experience what is like to be in these spaces collaboratively with others, working on tasks, and so on. And of course, as I mentioned before, immersion is a very important aspect. So you need the learner, you need the user to feel this sense of presence and to forget about the outside world and be concentrated on the tasks or the activities that you are designing in this virtual world. So at this point, I can show you a video of this environment, since it's quite difficult to actually go online now, or risky. So you see, this is the avatar that we used of one of our colleagues. And as you can see here, we have instructions on the wall about how to select your avatar, what you need to do in order to modify the avatar that you are using. And then we have created rooms, transparent rooms that we can use at the university for lectures or for webinars like this one today. So instead of you at the other side of the camera being actually just invisible, we could have you here sitting on chairs and having your avatars present in this room. So yeah, these are instructions on how to use the environment before someone goes in and actually investigate the academic integrity aspects. We need the users to get familiar with the environment. And then here we have lecture theaters in quotations, because we're not actually giving lectures, but someone could sit in these seats, chairs, and they can interact with the material that is presented to them in the screen in front of them. So they read instructions, they can actually play games here, you can incorporate whatever material you want. So you can even incorporate the Moodle environment in this OpenSim environment. And of course you can create interactive tasks and activities. So maybe there is a treasure hunt that you have to answer some questions in order to get something, a reward back, and so on. So this, for example, okay, to add what Angeliki mentioned before about the time that we need to prepare all these things. This, for example, is a final year project of a student. So we had the student working on this. Of course, it was under our supervision, and she is actually under our supervision, because this is not completely finished. We need to do more on this. And we had her working on this for a long time now. So yeah,
we almost feel sorry for the student.
Yeah. So you can see that it needs a lot of work behind developing these courses, but of course the students appreciate it, and they are, yeah. So, going back to the presentation. Yep. Okay. So, as I said before, we have not finished with this. We have already piloted it. Okay, so it works, but we want to do more. So we want to run a virtual world course through the whole semester. or the weeks that are needed to absorb the material online on academic integrity. And we want to evaluate it not only in terms of the knowledge that it will provide, that we can use the questionnaires we used before. We want to also evaluate it in terms of presence and immersion, and there are already validated tools that we can use here. And of course, the learning outcomes. So the weekly quizzes, we can collect the data of the quizzes that will be done by the students, and also a post-course quiz in the end to evaluate the knowledge of the students here. So this was for us a very interesting and constructive way of spreading the word about academic integrity at our institution. Yeah, we thank you for being here and listening to our experiences. And yeah.
And we are happy to answer questions either by the attendees here or by our viewers through the chat box, if any. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No questions in the chat box at the moment.
Okay. Right. Thank you. Yes.
I come from University.
Mm-hmm.
We have a branch of medicine and social sciences as well. And what we're planning to do is quite similar what you just presented. Thank you for your work. It really looks lovely. And I am very pleased that you have a vision for the future to make it even better. I have some detailed questions about the syllabus. Mm-hmm. Which topics did you include and why? Mm-hmm. And what was the proportion of those topics and decision you made about the topicality of them? And about the Turnitin, but I might ask it a bit later. Thank you.
Okay. Regarding the syllabus, we started with the fundamentals. We sort of developed the syllabus based on what are the major misconducts at our university. So it is like a work in progress, but so far we have spent 3 weeks on presenting different aspects related to plagiarism, and 1 week on self-plagiarism, because this is like the least understood aspect of plagiarism related offenses. And we have 1 week devoted to cheating in homeworks and exams related misconducts. And I remember that there is 5 weeks, but I don't recall the last week. Do you remember, Stella? I can come back and send you information.
It was on referencing.
Okay.
On citing resources.
For the thesis. Yeah. So
yeah, I think
that is the basic.
So we had not only definitions in the content, so not what is plagiarism and so on. We had actually activities. So we allow the student to perform some activities, and later on, I mean, one of the links, for example, was the activity, and the second link that the student would open would be, okay, comments on that activity. So most probably you did this and this and this, you should have done this and this and this, and this is how it should look if it was done by your lecturer or someone who is knowledgeable in this area. So yeah, especially the self-plagiarism, it was an important subject because also researchers are self-plagiarized without even, so yeah. Realizing it, yeah. So we...
Okay, and if I may offer some advice, because you mentioned medicine, I believe that what we have touched upon are very specific with regards to the demographics of students attending the university. But we also have a medical school, and we understand that the requirements for our medical school students are very different. And had I been involved to design something for medical students, I would emphasize definitely methodological approaches for conducting research, data falsification, fabrication. That would be like major issues when it comes to students of medicine. Yeah. And it is our understanding that especially in life sciences, these sort of misconducts, academic misconducts, are more often than it is actually acknowledged. And it also, it is, again, to my understanding, I'm not an expert in the medical field, but it is to my understanding that these categories of misconduct carry much more weight, and they are far more important than plagiarism. Not that I am sort of bypassing the issue of plagiarism, but in medical research, it is very important to have proper data and results rather than let's say, a passage that is not properly referenced. Okay, if I can put that into perspective.
Yeah, and I think in addition to what Angeliki just mentioned, I think the ethical aspect is also important in terms of if we are looking into academic integrity in general in the medical sciences and biomedical sciences. I think the ethical aspect is also important. And should be in a typical content of a course. Of course, as NI, we have resources that can support, because we have a strong team on biomedical sciences that are working on integrity. And there are case studies developed also by us in collaboration with them that can be used in such classes, I mean medicine classes.
Okay, taking under consideration what Stella has just mentioned, I would like to point out that what we have presented is primarily for undergraduate students, and for graduate students we would definitely have more self-directed activities, kind like case studies, discussions, and group activities that are based on case studies. And in particularly, we would like to mention that through the academic development, a student may face different kinds of challenges. At the beginning, they may be concentrating their efforts to develop good academic writing skills, but later on in their academic and professional career, it is very critical to identify where a deviation from the proper way to conduct either research or academic work in general can be like the starting point for possibly jeopardizing further more in their future development, in their future professional establishment. So it is not simply, at least in our mind, a deviation of doing something academically. It is a cornerstone upon which future overall performance can be jeopardized.
I wanted to ask, or maybe I misunderstood, was that compulsory for all the students, this course?
The undergraduate students are strongly encouraged to have this course. It is an open educational resource That means that practically any Greek-speaking student can go and take it, and the students of the university go through an orientation period. Through this orientation period, they're strongly encouraged to go and complete the course. It is not compulsory, though. It is not as if they don't complete this course, they will face some precautions. A good practice that has been undertaken in other universities is to give them their ID upon the completion of this course. Okay, but for our universities, this doesn't work because this other university that I mentioned, that they say you have to complete whatever course and then you get your ID, work with students who are physical in their campus. But about 45% of our students attend lectures through online courses. And we get to see them every time that they have examinations. So it would be a completely, how shall I say, complicated process to impose this kind of restriction. But we try to encourage them, and this is, I think, the key word, and try to explain that the sooner they get this out of the way, the better off they will be, the easiest it will be for them to secure good grades and progress without any issues in their studies.
What I also wanted to add is that the students at the University of Nicosia are actually paying per credit. So this course is free. They are not paying anything for this. What would have been a good suggestion for the university that we also have to consider is maybe if this was, for example, 1 or 2 credits course without paying anything towards their final credit, cumulative credit.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
We also think about the fact that when it's integrated into study program, like legit, so it could be taken more seriously, possibly. But then we have to think about the question how to harmonize or how to combine it to those, for example, research methodology courses, what we have not only in medicine but in all the branches. So not to duplicate the content, but somehow to support this basic knowledge what they get from these subjects.
Yes, I understand what you're saying, and I fully endorse the view that if something is mandatory, possible in the pathway, it is considered under a different angle, let's say, possibly more seriously. Let me offer you the experience that we have at the University of Nicosia. We have a national accreditation agency, sort of similar to QAA, and every time that we put forward a new program, we get a visiting team of academics from other universities, usually renowned academics from very good universities, and they look at the pathway from their point of expertise. So it is always a struggle for us what to put in the official pathway versus what to leave out. And we always keep in mind, at the back of our minds, of course, what would be the reaction of the accreditation team. So keeping in mind that often the experts in the accreditation teams are putting priority on cognitive skills and activities that relate to the development of competencies. It might be, I'm not saying that it is, but it might be a bit difficult to convince them that 1 or 2 credits out of 240 should be devoted to these activities, even though these activities are horizontal and transferable and yeah, with all the best intention in the world. So it's always a balancing act.
Our situation is very similar. I think I can say we very much understand what you're saying. Yep, that's a topicality in our country as well.
Okay. So, if there are no more questions, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. And may we take this opportunity to say that this is our first time in your country. And
Really enjoy it.
we are truly impressed. Thank you so much.
Thank you.